record.
Got it.
Well, welcome to another episode of Anomalies. I'm your host, Dave Jinks, with both my co-hosts Dan Hall and Glenn Farrell out on assignment. I am delighted to be flying solo tonight with our special guest, the Executive Director of Paradigm Research Group, Stephen Bassett. Good evening, Stephen. Welcome to Anomalies. How are you this fine Friday night?
Well, congratulations, David. I know you must be thrilled having discovered an actual pyramid on the moon. I think that's going to probably make the news. Could be huge, huge. So
Yeah.
all good.
I wish I could claim something that big. Bassett, right, is how you say your last name. I've heard other people say
Like
Bassett.
a dog, yeah.
Yeah, Bassett would be French. It's Bassett.
Bassett would be the French, the European version. And no.
No.
But Stephen is the European version of Stephen. So I'm European on the Stephen. I'm basically American dog on the back end.
American dog. Okay, that's a good way to start. Do you prefer Stephen or Steve?
With my podcast buddy Steve.
Okay, well, I'm a David, Dave, and whatever you call me is fine. You know, I thought about reading your complete bio to start the show, and then I realized it would probably take up half our time here because that baby is long. You've been doing this for a long time. You're coming up on 30 years with PRG. Again, Paradigm.
You don't have to make it that bad.
Well,
20,
that's something to be proud of. As Washington's
I'm coming up on 28. 28.
Oh, I thought it was 1996.
96 to 24.
Yeah.
96
Well,
to
I mean, okay, 28. We're coming up on 28. We'll round up to 30. But, you know, I've seen you described as Washington's UFO lobbyist. Let's start there. Is that a title you've learned to embrace? Is it too limiting given the broad scope of your efforts to encourage UFO disclosure?
It's not limiting it. It's just that was the hook that I used. I mean, when I was up in Cambridge working, volunteering with John Mack's organization, I wasn't a researcher, and I knew that, and I wasn't a fit, but I'd helped out, and I spent 4 months. It was a lot of fun. But now I had to decide how am I going to engage the issue? And I realized the politics was really the problem, not the science. And so I thought, okay, I knew politics. I've been living in and out of Washington my entire life. And I was an activist at heart. So a non-practicing activist, I guess you could say. Should have done more activism in my life, frankly, but you know how it is. And so I thought, what could I do? And I realized, wait a minute, nobody's probably ever registered as a lobbyist on this. Why would they? Not going to get paid. You'd just be made fun of. People on the Hill will literally lock their doors as you walk down the hall. And so I'm going, okay, so nobody's done this. So I'll go to Washington, and I knew how to register as a lobbyist, and I'll register, cost nothing, and I'll be the first one. How often in life do you get a chance to be the first of anything? If you know what I'm talking about, you get very few chances of that.
Yeah, sorry, it makes me think of the only other person that I know of who's acquired that title, UFO blank, and that's the UFO lawyer, Peter Gersten. Have you worked with Peter Gersten at some point in the past?
Oh yeah, I remember Peter. He's retired now, but yeah, he was the UFO lawyer.
Yeah.
But because he wasn't an activist and really kind of out there a lot, it wasn't it wasn't like a moniker that was chasing him around.
True.
But I was the first UFO lobbyist, and of course I pushed that really hard. Didn't matter that there's nobody in the Hills going to talk to me. It just meant that I had planted that flag. This issue is so important, it should have a lobbyist, right?
It should.
And it doesn't. And so I was the first. And that got the attention of the Washington Post eventually. And they sent a reporter out to interview me. Pretty good interview, actually. And they ran it on the front page of the business section in 1996, or it might have been 97, might have been early 97. And that's a big page. I mean, after the front page of the paper, the business front page is the second most important page.
Oh yeah.
And so I got a lot of attention. And so I was at that point the UFO lobbyist. That was the hook. And sure, I used it, but I knew that I wasn't a traditional lobbyist, and I wasn't going to be able to do the Hill much. But what I ended up doing is engaging and lobbying the media. that was where I went, and that's what I did. And I have probably done more to engage the media in this issue than anybody. Some people have had greater success in terms of what they've accomplished, but in terms of just a sheer volume of engagement, I knew if the media would get into this issue, the politics would follow. And so essentially, the moniker of UFO lobbyist followed me around, but I kept telling people, yeah, but I'm basically a political activist or a disclosure advocate. I also like that. That's what I am. And I happen to be registered. And I'm trying to get up on the Hill right now. I've had some queries in. So I might actually be able to do, after 28 years, some actually honest to good lobbying on the Hill if somebody will talk to me.
Well, I was able to look up, well, there's some group, I forget what the website is, that tracks lobbying, registered lobbyists, as you're describing. I see that you show up, or the Paradigm Research Group shows up for CSETI, Operation Right to Know, Skywatch International, Stargate International, and then you also got Enterprise Mission. I'm very familiar.
Wait a minute. Those were when I registered initially, I registered on behalf of these entities. So if you look at my registration, what you're seeing is entities that I supposedly registered on behalf of. All right. Now, of course, I wasn't charging anything, so it wasn't hard. And so in a way, I'm sort of representing them. It was just filling it out. So those are not registered lobbyists. They are entities that I was registered for.
Right.
And eventually as we move forward, that those connections were not important. And so those have been canceled out. And now I just lobby for Paradigm Research Group, my own entity. But there are at least 5 or 6 other registered lobbyists on this issue now. I am not alone. MUFON's hired a lobbying firm. And I think UAP Disclosure may be lobbyists. There's a couple others. And so finally, it only took about 25 years. People are going, hey, I like that gig. That's a good gig. Let's do that.
Well, you certainly set set the precedent here in far ahead of everyone else. Like you said, now there are a few, but you were the one doing it way back then. I'm just curious, the Enterprise mission, that's one that stuck out to me. Was that regarding the Cydonia?
That was regarding Richard. That was the name for Richard Hoagland's projects.
Yeah, Hoagland was. I just wondered, you were registering on their behalf. Paradigm Research Group was essentially registering or representing that. And I'm just curious. You remember specifically what that, what you were operating, what capacity lobbying wise for Enterprise mission? Was that a request of NASA to do this or that? Do you happen to remember what that is? Because I'm very interested in that. In fact, I was involved a little bit around the turn of the century with some of that stuff, and then Mars Global Surveyor, other aircraft trying to basically, like I said, I work with Peter Gersten in that case to try to get NASA to do something specific, which they ended up doing. Anyway, that was the same era. I'm just wondering if you remember what Enterprise mission was looking for.
I get you. Think of it this way. I registered on behalf of a number of organizations to show what's the word I'm looking for, to show some solidarity, show some substance and what have you. But was I doing specific jobs for each of them? No.
Okay.
What I was doing is engaging the entire issue. And to the extent that the media could be brought into this, everybody benefits, right? All of the organizations benefit as disclosure moves forward. And so my overall general work was benefiting. Now, I didn't know when I initially signed up how things were going to go. I certainly didn't think it was going to take 28 years to get to disclosure, I assure you.
Yeah.
So you sign up, you don't know what's going to happen, right? I could have got a bunch of donations, things could have opened up. But what happened, of course, was a very long, difficult process that strung out. And so I did what I could, where I could, and I went to my strengths. And my strength is speaking. So interviews, conferences, lectures, things like that. I got more into that, but never stopped engaging the media. I have a huge media list. I've done 1,500 probably interviews.
Mhm.
So, and if it wasn't for the pandemic and some other stuff that happened, it kind of took me off the field for a while.
Mhm.
I'd be hot right now, but I have to get back on the field. I sort of got, off the field, and then things heated up because I wasn't able to deal with the pandemic and some other things that happened, as well as some, though many people were literally wiped out. I've
Mhm.
survived, but it wasn't fun.
Well, that's kind of where I'm getting at here, going all the way back to 25 plus years, in that I remember your name from way back then when I was first sort of starting to get into this stuff. And we've gone through these cycles that you're well aware where it looks like stuff is happening. And then we have long periods where you say, what happened? Something was supposed to happen. I mean, we get these teasers almost, and then things get shut down for whatever reason, whatever event. Um, and some things seem to die. And unfortunately, some of the people involved retire or die,
Sure.
and you're one of the few, and I want to say kudos to Steve Bassett for being one of the very few constants over the last 30 years in here, because like you said, you've been going at it, doing everything you possibly can, talking to everyone you possibly can, and maintaining relevancy and not being turned into a joke like other activists,
Sure.
so to speak. I mean, you've survived through it all. So I want to say thank you for doing that. I'm thinking back as far as I can, and you were there with the paradigm clock, and you were there, talking to Art Bell probably and everyone else after him. But that actually, now that I brought that, I want to know, is the paradigm clock still something that you maintain, or what? Where's that right now?
I milked that clock for many, many years, and um, I don't I refer to it in my lecture sometimes and what have you. But I'm not out there pushing it too much. It is because I sort of it just kind of lost a lot of its mojo.
Hmm.
It's still a good idea, and I talk occasionally about the race between my paradigm clock, which is midnight is disclosure, and the doomsday clock, midnight is nuclear war. And I
Right.
may bring it back, but I'm not managing it. For many years, I actually was following events and then moving that clock depending upon
Mhm.
events, right? Whether it
Right.
was away from midnight or toward midnight. But eventually I kind of stopped doing that. But it's still on my website somewhere. Right now, the focus is on the doomsday clock, which
Yeah.
is recently, after being set the closest to midnight ever, 90 seconds,
Hmm.
when it came time to revisit it again, they made a big announcement, uh, which always gets attention. That's why they do what they do. They've done it since 47. They didn't move it closer to midnight. I thought they would. They should have, frankly, but
Hmm.
they kept it at 90 seconds. So they gave the usual press conference and reminded us that, like, we're dancing on the edge
Hmm.
of the volcano, and we better do something pretty soon. So the doomsday clock, I refer to it all the time. These are the little tricks. In
Yeah.
other words, I've been a in other words, activism can be anything you want it to be. And I've tried to do everything I can with limited resources. I never really had, I've only had major resources once, and that was for the citizen hearing on disclosure. And that's my fault. I was born in a Navy family. Uh, I supposed to go to the Air Force Academy and become a second lieutenant and never have to look back. And it didn't work out. Suddenly I'm in the real world, and I had no business sense. The idea of making money, you don't have to make money. The government just pays your dad every month. And so I was never good at making money. I tried several times. I'm
Oh,
awful at it.
it's not easy. Well, see, the doomsday clock and the paradigm clock are, of course, symbolic. You can't boil some of the stuff down to minutes and seconds necessarily until you see the, mushroom cloud on the horizon, I guess. But the fact that you maintain that is just a constant reminder that we need to pay attention to where we are in this cycle. That's what struck me. So I remember that from before. I just wondered. But
Well, it was designed to get people's attention. And
yeah,
increasingly, we don't need to get people's attention anymore. We
well,
got their attention.
yeah, good
Yeah, you know
good
what I mean?
point. But you do need to keep them on the right track. There are lots of tracks that people can get on, and a lot of them are wrong. Most of them are wrong when you're looking at the media, because the media spins and spins, and you know, that's just a fact that we have to get,
The media goes along. It doesn't spin as much as you think. The government spins. The media coverage of this
Yeah,
issue has been pretty much comprehensive in terms of what, why, when, and where. All right, or
yeah,
what, when, and where. There have been tens of thousands of articles written since '47 on this subject. I started linking them on my website in 2006. I linked everything that was substantive that I could,
mm,
as much as I could. Uh, but I couldn't, I wasn't going to be able, I wasn't going to go around the newspaper offices and try to get in their archives and start searching web archives. It would just be too extraordinary. So I've now linked 15,000 articles on my website to coverage of this issue, and it's very reasonable, legitimate coverage.
mhm,
Increasingly, there's almost no skeptical articles, pieces at all. So they've covered it. What the media didn't do, of course, I've pointed out a million times, is that I think because they knew the government didn't want them to, a little cooperation.
mhm,
The media didn't send out investigative reporters
yeah.
to look into it.
Well,
Right?
there was something on CNN today, first, you know, front page. Did you happen to read that? An opinion
I've
piece,
already logged it in, but I haven't read it yet. But yeah, there's every day we're getting coverage
but
of 4, 5, 6 articles.
the opinion pieces, yeah, obviously the distinction you made is very important. The media just reports what the government tells them, which is not the same as spinning. The opinion pieces, though, there's quite a bit of spin there. You know, I
Well, I
believe.
mean, there have been many, and most of them are pretty good. In fact, not too long ago, for the first time, we started seeing op-eds
Yeah.
on this subject. Now, why? What do I mean by that? Some people don't know the difference. An op-ed is what? It's what opinion, okay,
Hmm.
and ed, right? And so if you're a columnist, you write a column. You've written a column for the op page. An op-ed is a consensus editorial by the newspaper, by the
Right.
editorial board of the newspaper.
Hmm.
And they're unsigned, and like in the New York Times, the Washington Post, they tend to be off to the left. They started writing, op-eds started turning up about this, in which the editorial boards were stepping into the issue with a editorial op-ed.
Hmm.
And by and large, they were not dismissive. And that was one of the countless signs that have shown that we continue to advance inexorably towards the disclosure event. So I'm
Hmm.
pretty much an expert on the media coverage. And the
Right.
point, and yeah, they report what they see and what they hear and what they're told. Not a lot of these things don't, the reportage doesn't come from government per se. It comes from interviewing people, it comes from events that take place. But if the government says something's going on, that's what they're going to write. But they will not go investigative journalists or Cy Hirsch on them. They
Hmm.
know that if they do that, the government will not like it. And believe me, they could. They could go
Yeah.
hunting for sources, deep sources, documents. Remember the Pentagon Papers, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That set the Vietnam War on its end, caused all kinds of havoc because the New York Times, the Washington Post went investigative journalist on the war.
Right.
They have not done this on this issue.
No.
Virtually nothing of that type.
Hmm.
And that was the deal, I think, that they explicitly or implicitly cut, meaning this is a free country, First Amendment, press rights, and all that. We're going to cover this issue, but we're not going to start going through your trash cans and trying to find whistleblowers and put them in silhouette and bring them on in 60 minutes or whatever. No, we're not going to rattle that cage because we accept your national security dictum on that. And so, in that sense, the media, by and large, until recently, now it's changing fast,
Hmm.
went along with the cover up. And that was a very significant component of the truth embargo. I say cover up, I meant truth embargo. If the media was not going to investigate it, then that was going to make it much easier to maintain the truth embargo. But the coverage, the tens of thousands of articles that were written, certainly didn't help the truth embargo. I mean, it helped the activist movement reach out, get people involved, and raise public awareness. And so, in that sense, the media has contributed.
Right. So let's, you know, this logically leads to the David Grush revelations, if you want to call it that, or at least the prominence that he helped this cause reach, at least for a temporary moment.
Yeah.
But I want to know what. Well, I was going to ask you, what does true disclosure look like? And your answer might be, it looks like what it is right now. But maybe there's something. It looks like what's happening now. Is that the answer, or do you have more to fill in that
Oh, I clarify.
answer?
The confusion is my fault. I made a decision way back, early aughts, that as part of other language changes that I've helped to institute, that this movement, which was by the year 2000, 2001, was really starting to become a movement. Stephen Greer, of course, was the initial champion. And by the way, he's still doing what he's doing. He goes back further than me. He goes back in the late 80s.
That's true. Yeah.
He's never stopped. So believe me, I'm not. There are other people that have even more persistence than I do. The point is that the movement that was developing didn't have a prize. It didn't have a fundamental goal. If you want people to support an activist movement, sometimes risk their lives, put up money, time, volunteer, whatever, there has to be a prize. There has to be a clear, defined goal. Not just, let's just make the world better, right? Make the world a better place. Bring peace. Now, there are groups that are peace groups, but usually they're doing and targeting certain goals. We didn't have that. And I said, well, we got to have it. And I knew what that was. It was the confirmation by the president. Once the president confirms the ET presence, everything changed. Everything. It's a whole nother really world almost instantly. And a whole long list of things that can't happen now can happen then. And so the confirmation of that, I decided to call it disclosure with a capital D. The term disclosure with a small d, the standard word for revealing and getting information out, was well in play. But the capital D event was not. And so it's confusing to some people, but I started defining it and have redefined it thousands of times in the last 20 years, is capital D disclosure is the confirmation of the ET presence by heads of states of nation, starting almost certainly with one, and then the rest follow. That's disclosure. It could take less than 5 minutes. Head of state comes out, gets in front of the mic, says, look, I've checked out, talked to a lot of people, got some evidence brought to my attention, yada, yada, yada. And we're not alone. Talk to you next week. Boom, that's disclosure. It's done. We're in the post-disclosure world. It's that simple. And so that is what disclosure is. Full disclosure, which you hear about, is the desire of people to learn everything. They want to know everything the government knows. That could happen. And that process will start almost, actually will start, was already underway in a sense as a result of the 4 years of legislation. So some of that's underway, but if the president confirms, then it really gets underway. And then in the years following the disclosure or confirmation event, a lot of stuff is going to come out, but not all at once. And some things will be held back for various reasons, and then maybe put back in play until eventually everything the government knows will be in the public hands. It's going to take a couple of years minimum, if not 3 or 4. So that's full disclosure. Okay. And that's fine. Right. And I want to see that one day, but the movement is about getting disclosure, capital D, the confirmation event. And it's most likely to come from our president, though if they don't get off their ass in the Senate Intelligence Committee, it might come from some other head of state, and that would not be a good thing.
But what we're seeing now, would you argue, is small d disclosure leading up to big D? I mean, when is big D? Because you can hear a lot of people arguing that that'll never happen.
No,
A lot of well-informed people say, that's just not going to happen. It's going to be dragged out piece by piece, bit by bit from the military-industrial complex. There are going to be people who leak, people who, reveal whatever that causes an undeniable puzzle to be formed here with the pieces. Yes, of course, it would be easiest if Joe Biden or Donald Trump got up and said, hey, look, people, there are aliens. Here's what we're going to do about it now, or whatever. But you know, is the small D leading to the big D, and what's
Yep.
your time frame given what you've watched up to this point over the last 3 decades?
Well, it should have happened in 1948,
Well,
as you
well,
asked.
yeah,
Should
that's
have happened in
true. It should have.
1953. Yeah, it
And
could have
so
happened. It should have happened in 19, possibly 63, 93. It's interesting how all these things,
Clinton,
but it didn't.
yeah,
So the truth embargo is still in place 76 years after Roswell.
mhm,
But there was small d disclosure going on from the beginning.
right.
There's been a stream of disclosure coming in bits and pieces and bits and spurts for the entire 70.
And is there a critical mass of the 7 decades worth of small d disclosure? I mean, that you see, where's a point where it has to happen? Or
Sure.
is that
So
point
small d disclosure has been
realistic?
going on all this time. It's still going on, but more has happened in the last 7 years than
Mhm,
in the previous almost 70. In terms of the political process, the disclosure process as the big D disclosure process. And I think of two processes. The disclosure process is the process of revealing. Okay, continuing to get information out. Fine. The big D disclosure process is those things which are specifically getting us to that confirmation announcement. So you've got two disclosure processes going on. I know
mhm,
it's confusing. So the trigger point that that marked the beginning of the end, right,
mhm,
was the New York Times articles of December 16, 17, 2007. Everything has fallen from that. And it just set in motion all that we're seeing now. There's a logic to it. If you follow it, there's a logical
mhm,
process going on there. It's not completely nuts. Plenty of complications and some setbacks and everything else. In particular, some extreme events that have distracted and or slowed it down,
mhm,
like light passing through an object. It slows down as it goes through that object.
mhm,
The biggest one being the pandemic.
right.
The second biggest one, the political chaos in America, and the third biggest one, the Ukraine war.
Mhm,
And then the fourth one would be the writer's strike in terms of the
mhm,
content industry.
mhm,
So it didn't have to take 7 years, but it could have been done sooner. But on the historical situation, it looks like it's going to go 7 years. So
mhm.
this has been intense, and in the last 3 years, it really took off. Right. So now we're in the end of the end game, as they like to say in chess, in which ultimately the truth embargo will be checkmated.
Now, is the David
And
Grush
we're close to, and Grush is part
event,
of the end game. He's a major player in the end game.
is this as big as it seems to those of us who've been watching this stuff for many, many, many years? And if it is, why did it seem to disappear so quickly? I remember I watched a panel of UFO guys, Richard
Yeah.
Dolan and Linda Moulton Howe, and the usual group. Everyone except Richard was saying, "Oh my God, it's here finally! I'm going to see this before I die." And Richard was there going, I wouldn't get too excited about this yet, guys." So he was kind of the voice of reason in that room, from what I could tell. And I think it turned out that he was right. However, you see stuff that's happening behind the scenes, and I want to know: are you still seeing the boulder rolling down the hill? With this momentum that Grush
Sure.
brought us?
Not just Grush.
Well, he's
Huge
he's the head.
things.
He's the face that went behind that was that we all remembered the name and the face because he was the fresh new guy who popped up seemingly out of nowhere to most of us.
Again, if you want to judge where we are,
Hmm.
you don't base this on just the general public's perception. You base it
Right.
on everything that's happened, and you talk to the people that are aware of most everything that's happened.
Hmm.
If you talk to somebody that doesn't know much about what's happened, what are they going to say? Yeah, I don't see anything happen. Okay, and this is the way it is.
Right.
That's just common sense, right? And so if the dam is breaking, and you're surveying that dam, you know it. Everybody downstream doesn't know it. And so you ask them, how's everything going? It's great. You worried about the dam? Oh, why should we worry about the dam? Then you talk to the person that's working on the dam, and he says, oh, this baby's going to go anytime.
Mhm.
And so I can
Yeah.
assure you, what's happened in the last 3 years is absolutely off the scale, unprecedented. And if you the more of the you know about the history of the phenomena and the truth embargo, the more unprecedented it seems. Right.
Right.
In other words, most good chess players know, obviously, it's visual, but it's also schematic, or rather strategic. When a chess game gets to the end game, there's less pieces on the board, and
Right.
somebody's going to lose pretty soon. Okay. And if you don't know how to play chess, you have no idea. So what I'm telling you, Richard and I disagreed on this, and we'll see. It doesn't matter. Uh, I love him. He loves me. He's a great guy, and so
Mhm.
this is something that is fun. If anything, we like to debate and discuss and play
Right.
off each other. Point is that in the last 3 years, we have had 4 successive tranches of legislation, each one bigger than the next. The last one could have been as big as all the previous 3, but he got pared back in the reconciliation conference, and that's a big story, a big deal.
Mhm.
But overall, 4 tranches of legislation that were literally building a legal scaffolding to deal with disclosure. Right?
Right.
And prior to that, the previous 73 years, how much legislation had we had on the subject? Buckus.
Yeah. Nothing that I
And it
ever.
wasn't just some vanity bill, standalone vanity bill that some congressman or woman put out to get attention. One of them was in the COVID relief bill, a $2 trillion bill, and the other 3 were in the National Defense Appropriation Act. I mean, this is
Right.
one of the most important pieces of legislation.
Mhm.
And so, again, if you don't know the history, it's like, yeah, it's just another law. No, 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 no. And so, 4 pieces of legislation in just 3 years' time.
Mhm.
We've had a number of politicians go public and say there's an extraterrestrial presence. Prior to that, 0. The first UAP caucus was formed in the House. Prior to that, 0. All right. There has been years of briefings behind the scenes of members of Congress where witnesses are brought up there to talk to them privately to give them a sense of what's going on so they can make decisions about hearings and so forth. That's been going on for 3 years. We don't know how many witnesses have been up on the Hill talking to somebody. It's many dozens, I think. That was unprecedented. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you've got people coming forward and actually saying, matter of factly, there's an ET presence. People that can't be dismissed. Robert Bigelow, billionaire, big NASA contract, says there's an ET presence twice on 60 Minutes.
Mhm.
Right? Of course, way back, go back further, Edgar Mitchell, astronaut, Apollo, walked into the moon, PhD in astrophysics, in a press conference I held here, said to the CNN cameras, there's an extraterrestrial presence here. Okay? Gary Nolan, Nobel Prize winner, Nobel Prize nominee, goes on Tucker Carlson, says there's an extraterrestrial presence here. The
Mhm.
first congressman ever to do it, Tim Burchett, a Republican Tennessee, goes on News Nation, says there's an extraterrestrial presence here. So that's all been going on before Grush turned up.
Mhm.
And then Grush took it to another level.
Right.
And why? Why was this so important? Well, because we had a pretty good idea of what happened. His credentials and history were known. And when you look at the entire picture, it is unquestionably exactly what we think it is. Grush was assigned, after doing several stints in intelligence at various entities, agencies, as a retired major in the Air Force, in addition to stints in Iraq. Very bright, brilliant guy. He was assigned to the UAP task force, the early entity that was set up early on. I think it was in the first bill that Rubio sponsored. And so he's there. So he's in the UAP task force. And so he's the guy that maybe talk to or say something to. In the early days, there wasn't a lot of protocols yet. Probably nobody's, should we talk to him, not talk to him? What's going on?
Mhm.
There's a UAP task force. What do we do? Who knows? But at some point, he was contacted by some USAP guys. Now, a USAP is an unacknowledged special access program,
Mhm.
meaning anybody in it will not acknowledge it exists. to anybody unless they know for a fact you have the clearance, of which very few people do. And that means that the president doesn't have a clearance, and he asks a member of that group, is there something going on there? The answer is there's nothing going on, Mr. President.
Mm-hmm.
Unacknowledged special access programs is where all of this stuff has been conducted, run, researched, and so forth. Pretty much all of it. There are aspects of it that I think are operating under somewhat less classified areas. Certainly intercept planes doing gun camera footage capture of UAPs, not for seconds, but for minutes, if not longer. That's essentially UAP stuff. And it's not operating on an unacknowledged special access program. It's being seen and scanned by F-18 pilots, right? And then as soon as they come back, they yank the footage, the scanning footage, out of there and stick it in a vault, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Grush gets contacted by some people that inform him about our crash retrieval program, which researchers in my field, including in books right behind me, have talked about and discussed for years. The people in this field that know we have a crash-ified vehicle, a number of crash vehicles. Brian Wood wrote a book called Magic Eyes Only, in which he gives evidence of one degree or another for 75 potential crashes. He just republished a second edition of it, upgraded a little bit, and now up to 100. Mm-hmm. And so we knew, but again, the fact that we know is meaningless because we in the UAP community are, as everyone knows, nuts, stupid, foolish, deluded, crazy, right? Because we're not rich, we don't have a PhD, we don't have a high GS rating. So why would they care about us? Plus, the government was telling them, these guys don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. Hey, it happens often. And so he gets that information. He calls up many of his intel contacts that he has established. Now, he knows they have clearance of a certain level. They know him. He's calling them up and saying, look, can you verify what these two guys told me? And quite a few of them said, yeah. At which point, as far as Grush was concerned, this was fact. And so he reports it, I believe. And again, I may be off, but the concept is what's important. He reported to somebody, I believe it was the Senate Intel Committee staff. And so he's saying, oh, I was just told this. And you probably should know that. And that's fine. Okay. But it was early. And the program that is underway to set up for disclosure, which I'll talk about later because it has nothing to do with finding out about this subject. It was a little early, and some people were peeved. You kind of, why didn't you just sit on that? We're trying to get something together here, and you go to the Intel committee, get them all worked up, right? Why'd you do that? They started giving him a hard time. Mm-hmm. Now, Grush is two-term Iraq veteran, Major Air Force. Guess what? He wasn't going to roll over. And so he got irritated enough that he took a formal complaint to the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community. That's in the Office of National Intelligence. His name is Thomas Monheim. And he presented a case for why he's being harassed for doing his job. And he got acknowledged. That complaint was acknowledged and serviced. One of the reasons it was serviced is because the first and just prior Inspector General of the Intelligence Community, Charles McCullough, mm-hmm. was his representation. Pretty good lawyer to have. Yeah. Uh-huh. And so he gets acknowledged, gets relief, and supposedly back in his workspace or whatever, people inside government were not certainly openly giving him grief or threatening him with this or that. Okay. I think he tried to present some stuff to Arrow, and Arrow wasn't going to deal with it because Arrow wasn't set up to deal with anything, which is one of the reasons Kirkpatrick is so upset and angry and writing nasty letters, and I totally appreciate that. I have nothing but sympathy and empathy for Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. Mm-hmm. And so he's getting irritated. And then the threats continue. Death threats. Now, let me tell you something. In the modern world, giving anonymous death threats to somebody is trivial. And you can do it with almost no chance of getting caught. Yeah. You got to be really stupid. And so if somebody is determined, or a group is determined to drive you nuts with death threats or squat you or whatever, it's almost unstoppable. This is the nature of the world we're in now. And people are going to have to adjust to it, because if they don't, they're going to drive themselves crazy. And taking legal action, forget about it. You can't afford it, and you won't win. In rare cases, you might. And so he is now really irritated, and he is angry, and he makes a dramatic decision to go public with his complaint, not only about the harassment he's getting, but also about what he knows, what he has been told. And because he believes that the policy of the truth embargo is all or in part illegal, and was willing to say that, that made him a true whistleblower, which he called himself. And so he is a whistleblower, not just a witness.
Mhm.
And I get very upset when people start referring to just witnesses as whistleblowers. That is, it's like, not good. Don't do that. You are not helping them at all. All right.
Mhm.
Unless you want them to have death threats. Okay. So he comes forward in a dramatic way. He gets two fine journalists to get a story into the debrief, and he gives an interview to Ross Coulthard and News Nation. And News Nation is the #1 entity in the United States covering this issue right now, based upon my archiving. #1, way out there. And literally, it's going to make that network. It's going to be for that network what the Iraq War was for CNN. So expect big things from News Nation. And so he drops that bombshell on June the 5th, and all hell broke loose.
Mhm.
Because what, as you know, he said, I was told we have multiple crash vehicles. I was told we had multiple bodies from those crash vehicles. I confirmed that with a number of intel people with clearance that I happen to know. I took that to the Senate Intel. They know. And then when the harassment wouldn't stop, I took it to the Inspector General of the intelligence community. He knows. And now you know. And he just does it. Boom. Nothing like that had happened before. And so everybody's waiting to see what happened. Well, in the confusion afterwards, you got somebody saying something stupid thing here, another stupid thing there, and the Pentagon is kind of caught a little off guard, Arrow's caught off guard. And they're trying to adjust. So in the early days of his announcement on June the 5th, he's getting heat, he's getting trolled. Nowadays, whatever you do, if it's high profile, welcome to social media and the internet. If you think you can do that kind of thing and they'll leave you alone, you are completely deluded. And it's very hard on a lot of these guys, like Kirkpatrick and Grush, Elizondo, and others. These are people that have worked for the government, high-level positions, skilled positions, requiring bravery, sophisticated PhD work, that kind of thing. And they don't want to be on social media, I assure you. They don't want anything to do with it. Stay away from it. Fine, not bothered. But you step into this issue, and suddenly you're confronted with it. And these people are not used to that. They don't know what to do. They can't, they get up in the morning and turn on Twitter, and somebody's calling them a pedophile or something, and they go, well, what? So it's tough for them. But he finally, it settles down. He is not refuted. It's clearly, no one's going to refute it. And it's looking increasingly like everything he's saying is absolutely true. But still, back and forth, very speculations, usually theories, exotic theories. The truth embargo has made theorists and speculators of all of us, because they won't give us the full information. So we have to fill it in. It's like those, it's like getting a blank page and say, paint what you think a bird is, right? We're not going to give you any help. So what happens next is profound. And it took 39 days. So Grush is giving some interviews, did a bit of a, I guess he did a video, right? And was interviewed, kind of showing that he's still around, giving some interviews. And of course, his story is spreading worldwide and being covered, believe me, hundreds of articles in mainstream media about him. But where's it going to go? Now, of course, simultaneous with Grush's maneuver, the legislation is being put together in the Senate. The Senate version of the UAP bill for the 2024 FY fiscal year NDAA. And there was a limited amount of language up on the site, nothing much. And then a second bombshell was dropped. July 14, 39 days after Grush came forward, a new player, a new piece, a powerful piece was put on the board in this end game that's underway. And it wasn't a member of the Senate Intel Committee, which is leading on this by and large, so the House is trying to catch up. It was an ex officio member of the Senate Intel Committee by the name of Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic Majority Leader, one of the most powerful men in Congress, one of the Gang of Eight. And out of nowhere, he lets us know that he and Republican Mike Rounds of the Senate Armed Services Committee have spent much of the last 39 days writing 55 more pages of legislation to go with what had already been put together. And we're submitting it as the Senate bill. And went and looked at it, and my jaw hit the ground. I said, "Are you kidding me?" Right? The first thing I noticed when I reviewed the Senate bill, it was called an act, not an amendment. It was called the UAP Disclosure Act. Now, I'm not saying that any of the work that I or Greer or anybody else has done the last 30 years helped them come to that use of that word. But the fact that he used it, I thought, was a huge message to us. The UAP Disclosure Act. And it contained the UAP disclosure plan. And that plan was an elaborate, heavily supported plan, the intention of which was to ultimately reveal everything the United States government has, including vehicles and tech and bodies and everything else, and bring it forward, get it, put it in the public domain, archive it in the National Press Building, Smithsonian Institute, whatever, and that would be it. Now, will it take X number of years, but this was how it was going to be done. The legislation, the witness protections and protocols, the subpoena power that was going to be given to Congress, as well as a UAP review board, the highest levels of classification given to certain members of Congress so that they had the ability to go and look at anything they wanted. And then he dropped, that was the first shoe. He dropped the second shoe. And I couldn't believe it. He said, and in this bill, we will assert that the United States government has eminent domain over any non-human tech or non-human bodies in the possession of civilian companies and/or persons. Eminent domain. What that means, for those that are not familiar with it, is that we have the right to claim it. You'd get compensation, right? Be compensated, unless all the money we gave you over the years, billions of dollars to study, reverse engineer this stuff, is your compensation, whatever, but we can claim it, or we may not. And if we do claim it, we may still come back to you and do some sort of joint program in a public arena so that you could cash in terms of the benefit to your corporate shareholders. So it wasn't like we're going to send stormtroopers out there, raid your offices and take the stuff. So eminent domain. And I said, genius, absolute genius. Okay. I said, first of all, I said, look, if this bill passes as is, the Senate Intel Committee, it will not be able to hold hearings fast enough. I mean, they'll have to. I mean, literally, the world's going to be on fire. And if it has trouble in the reconciliation process, he could trade the eminent domain off for keeping the other substantial provision. So I'm thinking, this is genius. Okay. Yeah. I didn't realize how genius it was. And so that accomplished several things. I liken it to a grandmaster chess move in an end game of chess being watched by masters who understand the game, who think the game is almost certainly a draw. There's no way anybody can win it. And they suddenly this grandmaster makes a move which startles them all. Why'd you do that? What's going on here? And then they realize after a few minutes, genius. All right. That's what Chuck Schumer did. Why? Because the announcement itself on the 14th of July accomplished three things simultaneously. One, it confirmed Grush. I mean, he's saying that we as a government are going to claim eminent domain on non-human tech and non-human bodies. Well, I guess he's not going to do that if there is no non-human tech or bodies, right? That would be ridiculous. And so he just backed up Grush. eliminating probably any real significant diminishment of Grush's importance. Secondly, he sends a message to the Congress, not the Congress, rather, the Senate Intel Committee, saying, I have not said a thing on this all these 3 years, right? Virtually nothing. But I just said something today, so you now know I have your back. Or if they know they have his back, the rest of the world knows that he has their back. So he's backing up the Intel Committee, okay? That's the second thing that he's done. And the third thing he's done is essentially confirm the extraterrestrial presence, which is similar to the first thing, but he's basically confirming there's an extraterrestrial presence. That's a lot. All right. Okay.
Okay. Let me just, I'm tracking, I'm keeping up with you, I think, here.
Good.
The stuff, the ET stuff, the evidence, physical evidence, knowledge of all this going on for decades and centuries, maybe, all that history has been sequestered in the military industrial complex, for the most part, quasi-governmental entities or wholly corporate entities. Is that not accurate to say? So the government claiming eminent domain over this data and information, is that not just a power play saying we're going to we're putting you on notice, Elon Musk and whoever else is, a member of these Illuminati, these secret
Illuminati?
societies that, well, I mean, secret societies, you always see the parodies of
Lockheed Martin, okay?
Yeah.
Just think Lockheed Martin.
Raytheon or Lockheed Martin or the space program entities. I mean, they're the ones out there. They've got more information, I'm sure, than even the companies and the government on the ground, so to speak. But anyway, it's sequestered in these areas which are very hard to get access to.
Exactly.
And so what are you saying, the government, Schumer and making, this claim in eminent domain? There are different questions that come up. Is this a step towards true disclosure, or is this just a step towards hoarding the information so that they can figure out what the hell to do with it next, not necessarily release it? That's
what they've been doing all along. I mean, they've been sequestering it and embargoing it, embargoing the truth, and undermining the research of the private citizens all along.
So
this
the
is
cynical
the opposite of that.
Okay, so how will this really change the path towards disclosure then?
Well, I'll tell you.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure I was following your, the logic.
This master chess move again is brilliant. And so,
but who's the opponent then? Who's Schumer's opponent?
It's not a matter of opponent.
Okay.
The reality of the ET presence is known throughout the military intelligence complex, actually throughout the military industrial intelligence complex.
Okay.
So there are people in the DoD, all the services, the intelligence agencies, as well as a number of defense contractors, the same people that build our submarines and planes and satellites.
And there are factions within that complex, of course, though.
I call them factions. I'm simply saying that that's where the work is done in deep classified programs under heavy classification of the people. And so it's protected from the media and the public.
Yeah.
Right? But stuff does leak from time to time, and witnesses do come forward. So it's not perfectly sealed, but it is sealed enough, and that has been the case for over 7.5 decades. And so, what Schumer did is made a move that ultimately should end the truth embargo. And I told you the 3 things he accomplished when he made the announcement.
Right.
Okay, now, what happens after that announcement is quite extraordinary as well. What happened after that announcement, which was on the 14th of July? So we're talking about 3 months, roughly. Right?
Well, we had hearings.
No, we had a hearing, right?
Had a hearing.
I'm sorry, we had a hearing. 12 days later, they had the first hearing of a proper hearing with
which was
witnesses under oath.
extraordinary, in my opinion. I'm
Yeah.
sure you agree. It was incredible because you see Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, progressives, all on the same page, all looking at it going, yeah, I'll meet with you in a secret compartmentalized skiff or whatever. Let's go together. Let's set aside our political differences. That was very different than what we're used to seeing with
Well, it was the first
politicians.
hearing since 68. I mean, it was the
Yeah.
first real hearing since 68. It was limited, but one of the reasons it happened is because of what Schumer did. By
Mhm.
backing up Grush to that extent, he made it a lot easier for the House to make a decision to bring Grush in and put him under oath and listen to his testimony, right?
Right.
Not that they might not have done it anyway. The point is that Grush's testimony was even more powerful given what Schumer had done 12 days prior. So that hearing's on the 26th, but something more important than that was going on. For the first time since Roswell, the private sector, the defense contractors, where a great deal of the engagement of this technology has been worked on, right? Not simply because they were out from under the FOIA requirements, they are, and so that was a benefit, but that's not the principal reason they did it. They did it because these people have the tech and the staff and everything else to do it. That's why they help build our nuclear submarines and so forth. Okay, so there's nothing unusual about putting that tech in their hands. It doesn't mean there isn't ET tech in the hands of the government, right? In our own facilities, being worked on by government scientists.
Mhm.
Both is going on. But certainly the contractors have a considerable amount of it, which Grush was told and Schumer confirmed. And so for the very first time, they've had a free ride all these years, getting billions from the government to work on this tech, learn stuff, re-engineer stuff, having a great old time.
Mhm.
And certainly thinking ahead that one day, particularly if there's disclosure, they were going to be able to take what they have learned and engineered. And while the government will have access to it, they were going to commercialize it and make trillions of bucks. And they waited a long time. They couldn't do it. The truth embargo was lasted a long time. And so suddenly the government says we own it or we have the right to decline it.
Mhm.
They for the first time, they were forced to come out of cover. And then Ben Rich going in front of a couple of audiences and bragging about we have the tech to take ET home and statements like that. That's just
Right.
teasing. That's the nice way of saying it. Teasing. That's
Mhm.
not what we're talking about here. We're talking about they had to come out of cover for the first time because they had to stop that act, the UAP Disclosure Act. And the most important thing was the eminent domain. And so they launched a counter campaign to strip as much out of that bill as possible. Now, how do you do that? Do you threaten the Congress? I don't know. We got a lot of tech over here. And if you don't do what we say, we're gonna
Mhm.
radiate your home or something. No. It's a free country. It's a democratic republic. And so they got in touch with their lobbyists who are under strict NDAs, as well as perhaps other intermediaries, and they say you go get in touch with certain members of the House and, if possible, the Senate, and you're going to strip that language out. Tell them they got to strip that language out. And why would anybody want to care why they want that language out? Because the defense contractor industry gives millions and millions of dollars in campaign donations to many Democrat and Republican congressmen,
Mhm.
members of Congress. And I don't think it'll shock anybody to know that the Republicans get a larger share of that than the Democrats. And so they approach certain key members of Congress who get big donations from defense contractors and basically said, if you want those donations to continue, you're going to gut that bill. And the people they approached, which we didn't know until much later, a month or so went by. I don't know how many weeks went by before it started to become aware to certain people that are paying attention, something was going on. And a lot of social media engagement on that and press and so forth. There's something going on. They're going to attack the bill. And so who did they go to? They went to the Republican chairman of the House Intel Committee, of course, Mike Turner. They went to the Republican chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, Mike Rogers. You think Mike Turner or Mike Rogers get a whole lot of defense contractor donations to their campaigns? Yeah, they do.
Uh-huh.
And for good measure, they went to Mike Johnson, the new Speaker of the House. So on that side, they've got some powerful people who can influence the members of the Republican Party that are sitting in that reconciliation conference to complete or to come up with the final language of the bill. And I was not necessarily confident they could make many changes. Schumer's a powerful guy. But what we learned later was they also went to Mitch McConnell. And Mitch McConnell decided to side with the defense contract. I'm not aware of what donations he gets. I'm sure it's a decent amount. He went and talked to Johnson and Turner, and they together said, okay, we're going after this bill. And so with McConnell able to then put pressure on senators who are sitting on the committee, they gutted the bill. They pulled it all out, not just the eminent domain, all of the powers. And all they left was the core of the disclosure plan, which is, yeah, eventually, somehow, some way, stuff that we have secret is going to come out, be looked at, it's going to end up in the archives. But any power for you to do that is not there, right? So we'll decide. We who have the tech and have the documents and are in the classified program will decide. Right. So again, still, as Schumer said when he made a presentation to the empty Congress in order to put something on the record along with Mike Rounds, so well, a little disappointed, a little angry they did that, but we're going to keep fighting. Okay, fine. Okay. And so there you go. They gutted the bill. Now, let me tell you, the whole process generated a whole lot of press. And so not only did he force the contractors or the companies that are involved in this and their people to come out of cover, because everybody knew who was pushing against the bill. It wasn't the agricultural companies out there. It was the defense contractors with the tech. And so they had come. So when they did that, and here is where the chess move becomes grandmaster level. Schumer probably knew they were going to attack the bill. He might have thought they were going to swap eminent domain to keep some of the other, but in any case, he knew they were going to attack the bill. And he knew it was going to be obvious to anybody with a half a brain common sense who was doing it. And so essentially, he outed the defense contractors who, by demanding the eminent domain and other measures be taken out of that bill, confirmed to the world that they had ET tech and ET bodies. Because if they don't have ET tech and ET bodies, what do they give a damn about a bill that has powers to come looking for that stuff, which they don't have? And so now Schumer's confirmed the ET tech. The defense contractors have confirmed the ET tech. Grush has confirmed the ET tech. Who hasn't confirmed the ET tech and the ET bodies? And then here is the final piece of that grandmaster chess move, something that Schumer knew. He knew that, okay, everybody's on board. Everybody knows what's going on. The bill is what it is. The Senate Intel Committee can hold a hearing at any time. The witnesses have been lined up. They're interviewed. They got dozens to pick. They could put 20 witnesses up in a week's time, 10 sessions. It would blow the truth embargo to smithereens with many millions of people watching live. And once that hearing takes place for about a week, the president is able to come forward without any political consequences and in an appropriate way and state, hey, I watched it too. We're not alone. They can do that anytime. And when they do, you know what's going to happen? Senator Schumer and Mike Rounds, perhaps, maybe some other sponsors, are going to resubmit that entire bill word for word as a standalone bill into the Senate. Now, understand, just the week previous, the president of the United States, followed by Xi Jinping, Macron, Sunak, Trudeau, every other major nation has confirmed, yeah, there's an ET presence. The Senate's going to pass that bill, maybe 100-0. And then they're going to slide it on over to the House with the UAP control plan, the UAP oversight group, review group, board rather, the subpoena power, the classification level, and the eminent domain. You're going to slide it over to the House and say, you want to try to not pass that bill, right? With the whole world looking at them, you want to stand up to that bill? No, the House will pass it. They'll have no choice, and he'll get everything that they wanted and it could be within weeks from now, right?
Mhm.
That is a grandmaster chess move.
Hmm.
Chuck Schumer is the real deal. Now, the only thing missing in this end game is the Senate intelligence hearings, which are being buffeted by circumstances and geopolitical catastrophes. I get it, right? We're on the verge of nuclear war. The war in the Middle East is about to explode. God knows what's going to happen. I get it. And we have a campaign about to start, which is going to be different. It's going to be off the charts, unprecedented, bizarre, ultimately consuming. And so that's not helpful, but nevertheless, that's what's going to happen. So all they have to do is hold those hearings, and it's over. Now, here's what's going on. What I'm doing as an activist is trying to help persuade the three men who have the most power to hold that hearing: Chuck Schumer, Marco Rubio, and Mark Warner, all of the Senate Intel Committee, two former chairs, one a chair, one a former chair, and Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader. They can call that hearing anytime they want to. And so I set up a little activist maneuver called ShiftStorm, SHIFT, shiftstorm.org. When you go to that site, it's also linked on my website, paradigmresearchgroup.org. You go to that site, you get all the basic instructions of how you can send any number of tagged tweets to these three members' Twitter account. Now, a tagged tweet is when you send a message that includes their handle at whatever it is, at Senator Schumer, at Marco Rubio, whatever it is. You put that handle in there, and it puts it right in their notification box. So the goal is to see if we can get many thousands of these tagged tweets in their notification box, all of which are monitored by staff. I assure you, they monitor the Twitter account and the notification box, because that's how they find out what people out there are saying about their boss. And they start seeing thousands of messages coming in saying, we want congressional hearings in the Senate. We want Senate Select Committee on Intelligence to hold the hearings for the witnesses. We want it immediately. They're going to call up their boss and say, boss, something going on here. The boss will hang up, bring up Twitter on his machine, go to the notification box and scroll them. So we're doing that. It's happening now. It's been going on for a month. Also, what I put up on that site, the form where you can send them a nice email, right? You have to put in information on the form. And technically thousands of emails can come in. By the way, the Twitter works around the world. So all 1.5 billion people on Twitter, unless there's some blockage within their country, can send a tag tweet to these three gentlemen. That's a lot of people. And disclosure is about the entire planet. So don't feel you have to be an American to contact them. And then in terms of the email forms, you can do that too. But as it happens, if you don't enter an address in the state that they serve, New York or Virginia or Florida, and an appropriate zip code, your message will not go through. Just saying. So that's what's been going on. And of course, I have been talking about this relentlessly. I've done over nearly 100 podcasts in the last 60 to 70 days. And I'm pounding this message out there. Can't get on CNN, can't get on MSNBC, can't get on News Nation. Little too intense for them, I guess. I don't know. But hey.
It is. Sorry, finish that thought.
Yeah, but I've got a podcast list of about 290 now. So I can put it out, and it's out there. Plus, I'm on social media, Twitter at Steve Bassett. Please follow. And so that's my contribution, as well as all the media coverage, which is keeping the issue alive no matter what is happening. The articles never stop. Go to my website, go to resources, go to Print Media Archive, 15,000 articles, including 1,900 last year, and we want to paste to 2,000 this year. And these are triaged out of twice that many news pieces, because many of them are just not significant, trivial venues or silly or whatever. So it's only half of probably the total amount of coverage that's available. That is all driving this forward. And so the question now before us is, will the Senate hold these hearings? I'm going to let you go for a second, and then I'll eventually tell you why the hearings must be held as soon as possible.
Ooh, well, that's a lot of stuff. First, I want to say, let's get this right, though. ShiftStorm, SHIFT, storm.
Don't forget the F. Don't forget the F.
.com. .com,
.org. Shiftstorm.org.
.org. Okay. We'll have
Got that
everybody
domain.
go there. Everybody who's listening, go there, check it out for sure. And what is Paradigm Research Group what you call your home site, your
It's my organization. It's been a sole
best way
proprietorship
to,
for 27 years.
okay, the
But
best
it's
way to
about to
find
become
you,
yeah,
your stuff. Okay. And then
contact information. You can subscribe to the newsletter, or rather the updates list,
okay.
and so forth. But soon I'm going to convert it to a think tank. It'll have the same name. It'll be a think tank and a nonprofit.
We would expect nothing less of you, the man with endless energy, and we all owe a debt of gratitude that is the case. We're a little over time. Luckily, we've got freedom on the show to go however long we want, but I'm going to respect your time and cut it about
No. This
90
is my
minutes.
job, David. This is my
Well,
job. I did a 6-hour Twitter space about 4
okay.
weeks ago.
Well,
I'll give you whatever time you want.
I don't want to press too much further because you've summarized basically what we need to know going forward from this point.
Yeah.
I do want to ask though, the hearing was, like I said, seeing people of different political affiliations and across the spectrum just agreeing with each other. It was a breath of fresh air. You got Matt Gates and AOC was in there a little bit, and just like, this is something I could get used to because it looks like government working for the people doing their jobs, right? But there was a lot of discussion about getting into those secret compartmentalized, what is it, information facility, the
Yeah.
SCIFs, which is where the Congress people get to speak directly with Grush about well, if they hold the correct, adequate classifications, which I don't know how that all works. Is there anybody in Congress who's not going to be able to hear what Grush says?
Plenty.
Who gets
Well,
into
they held a skiff. They couldn't get a skiff right after the
So that's my question is, do you have knowledge about what, if they did meet, did anything come out of that for that
well,
we
it
could
was a
know?
skiff, so it was all classified.
Yeah.
So they couldn't talk about the particulars.
In,
But there were two things.
okay, yeah, go ahead.
The most important thing about the skiff they finally got back on the 12th
Mm-hmm.
was the person who briefed them. And there was the entire UAP caucus, I think, was in there, and maybe a couple of other people, about 17. The person that briefed them was the current Inspector General of the intelligence community, Thomas Mondheim. That's never happened before.
Okay.
And guess what? He didn't say much. He couldn't answer a lot of their questions. He couldn't give them anything really profound. Most of them were disappointed, though some understood the importance of the fact it happened at all. So it was helpful, but and he needed to do it because they were driving him crazy and pressing and going public. And so it was basically not to give them some special information per se, but to show some respect to the House and to the UAP caucus. We're not we're important. This issue is real, and I'm showing him respect. But it is too soon. This has got to pass through the Senate Intel Committee, not through the House subcommittee. And so I'm glad it happened, but not much came from it. Now we can finish up with this. There are 3 extremely important reasons why this hearing has got to be held, and maybe 4, I think, as soon as possible. Like they should call it next week.
Yeah.
They can't call it too soon.
They should call it last week.
They should have called it last week, believe me.
Yeah.
Here's the first reason. This is the most nonpartisan issue any Congress has ever dealt with. It's virtually impossible. They politicized everything, but they can't politicize this. It transcends politics. And we've seen that over and over again. And so you've got this issue that is totally nonpartisan, that members of Congress and people campaigning for office can speak to without having to make asses of themselves. It would be extremely helpful to the public. It might mitigate some of the partisanship. It might make this election a little more tolerable, and it could begin the healing process where these people can stop being their mortal enemies and actually work together. There's nothing even comes close to having that ability. So that's the first reason. Second reason, okay. There's other heads of state out there And as you know, they know what Grush, they're following our media. They know about Grush. They know what he said. They know what Schumer did. They know all this stuff. And some head of state is going to say, hey, I've got crash vehicles. We know there's an ET presence. And most of them do. We're going to announce it. Screw the United States.
Yeah.
And so the announcement comes from another country. China would be the worst case scenario. And our president is sitting in the Oval Office, right, with a face full of eggs, having to come second and say, yeah.
I knew about
right.
that too, but I didn't tell you.
Yeah. So that's not good. That's bad. And
Yeah.
you know, I've been telling I've been talking to the government through media interviews for 20 years, saying the same thing over and over again. And they are so arrogant. Or Xi Jinping, Putin, all these people work for them. Yeah, turns out they're all CIA people, getting a check from the CIA, whatever. Maybe that's the case. But that's the second reason, right? The third reason is, and it's not just the nonpartisan shit, it's this. We have had semi-disclosure, semi-capital D disclosure, not full capital D, because the president hasn't done it. But who hasn't? Okay. Gary Nolan has said it. Burchett has said it. Grush has said it. The defense contractors have said it. Schumer's confirmed it. It's hanging there over the head of every single one of the candidates running to run the country in 2025. About 2,000 candidates, balloted candidates. And this thing is not resolved.
Yeah.
What are they going to say? And the president's running for office too. What's he going to say if the press, comes to one of his press conferences and says, "Mr. President, you want to run, you're running for president. What are your thoughts on David Grush's testimony?" I don't want to be the one that has to advise President Biden about that. That can't happen. And so if they don't get this done, this campaign is going to be even worse in many ways than it was already going to be. On the other hand, if they get it done, then all of the candidates will have some time to get up to speed, read a few books, watch a doc, and be able to make intelligent answers to these questions and formulate a view about what they think about it, what they think about disclosure, what they think about the presence, what they think we should do about it, what would happen if we had open contact, all that stuff, which the people will eat up, right? And and so we end up electing a government that takes power in 2025, in which we have some idea what all of the elected candidates think about, feel about the fact that we're not alone in the universe, which is exactly the way it's supposed to be. But if we don't get disclosure, all we're going to get is mass confusion. Everybody's going to make an ass of himself, and that's not going to be a significant factor in how they get elected. I mean, so it's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. And then the last reason is this. As I've said countless times, the only chance we have to avoid a nuclear war, which could very well start as a single terrorist attack bomb or tactical nuke in a war theater, and then the question is, does it spread or not? But DEFCON 1 somewhere, everything else will be DEFCON 2. The only chance we have to avoid it, because we're heading toward it like a freight train, is disclosure. This sea change, this massive paradigm shift, this world view paradigm shift, where suddenly the whole world is different and people are rethinking everything. That is the one shot we have to go to where we have to go to somehow end the risk of nuclear war. Not solve everything, but at least deal with that. And if we don't, if that nuclear war breaks out this year, it's over. It's over, right? And as these people are slowly burning to death in the fires of a nuclear explosion, Washington will be hit by, God knows, probably 8 bombs, right? 8 missiles, whatever, hypersonic missiles. As they're burning to death in the radioactive fires, they'll be wondering, maybe we should have held those hearings in January. Maybe we should have gotten the hearings done so the president could announce the 18th president. Too late. I'm serious about that. I am not joking. That is a serious consideration. And if you're not paying attention to what's going on in the world, and you don't have a bunker somewhere deep underground, well, things may not turn out the way you want.
Well, it's just, I'm laughing because the situation that we've gotten ourselves into because of a lack of guts for so long. There's been nobody who was willing to tackle, no politician that was willing to follow this through. I mean, yes, it looks like we've got some allies now, although I sometimes have doubts, the cynicism has been burned in my brain
Sure.
watching things happen over the years. Is Chuck Schumer actually working for people, or is he just trying to wrest power back and get that information for the government to use versus the giant corporations? I mean,
Oh, he's doing his job.
the way you painted the picture, I agree. This is some very positive change
Sure, he's doing
that's
his
been
job.
going
I mean,
on.
the Congress is supposed to have oversight over the military
Well,
intelligence complex. For those who don't know
sure,
that.
sure.
And they've given it up, and he's trying to get it back. He's just trying to balance the scales.
As
And it's
far as disclosure goes, though, is it
yeah.
a power play? Is it a power play to get that information out to disclose it, or is it just to sequester it more securely in, our side of the arena or
Well,
whatever?
everything
So,
that's going on is not leading to more disclosure, more truth embargo. It's the
yeah.
end game. The
Well,
end game of the truth embargo.
yes, I appreciate
See,
that.
the water has broken through the dam. And the way it
Yeah.
works is the water just keeps coming. It doesn't go back into, it doesn't go back through the
Well,
crack
we need
and fill up the lake again.
some very brave people, some very brave politicians to, usher us through this building catastrophe
True.
instead of
True.
to just, take what they can get and go to high ground, so to speak. So are they in our corner or not? How many different analogies can I use? How many
Well,
different sports analogies can I use? But it's kind of like watching a game, isn't it? Seeing these, you've talked about chess, these players playing. It's it's gonna be this year is gonna be an amazing spectacle.
extremely complicated and very difficult and challenging.
And
And my job,
we didn't even get into what the alien presence really means and what it really represents, and
that's another show, my
that's
friend.
another show. But I really
There'll
would
be
like
plenty
to.
of time enough for that,
I'd like to talk about that stuff with you at some point in the future. Definitely, we'll keep you on the invite list. I know you're very, very busy, and you got to get out there and do everything you can the way you've been doing it. Steve
Well,
Bassett, we really
before we go,
appreciate
promos.
it. Yes,
Promos.
promos,
Ready
of
for
course.
promos? Okay. Conscious Life Conscious Life Expo.
I went
20,000 people,
there.
LAX Hilton, June 9 to 12. I'll be there. There's going to be a disclosure panel and a disclosure lunch with
Okay.
all kinds of special people there. And of course, 250 speakers.
Yeah,
I'll be there, LAX
big.
Hilton. Also, the Contact in the Desert conference looks to be quite extraordinary this year. We could have way over 3,000 people. This is May 30 to June 3, June 4 for the intensives. And it's at Indian Wells Resort, the Renaissance Resort in Indian Wells, California. It's quite deluxe. Go to the website, contactinthedesert.com. All right, that's coming. Also, I'm going to be doing George Norrie Monday night, starting at 10 o'clock. The first hour.
This Monday?
Yes.
29th.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, this Monday, the 29th.
Yeah.
I'll be the first guest for about an hour, I think. I'm not sure how he's splitting it up. And I'll be talking about a number of things, particularly Kirkpatrick and some other recent developments. So that's happening. The Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, which myself and my public relations agent, Dan Harari out of Hollywood, we launched the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance back in November. It is just about to become a nonprofit. We're just about to get our 501(c)(3) status.
Okay.
This is an unusual organization. It is located at hollywooddisclosurealliance.org, and it is not commercial at all. It will raise money, tax deductible donations. It has one fundamental job, and that is to help people who are willing to publicly acknowledge their interest in the film industry, television business, and even music, the entertainment industry, which we symbolize with the term Hollywood. Includes all of LA County plus Canada and a lot of rest of the United States, UK, whatever, the content creating industry, facilitate their ability to connect with people in the UAP field. the researchers, the activists, the documentarists, okay, the witnesses, the contactees, all right? The ones that have been carrying all the water for the last 70 years and know all this stuff that they don't know, but they know that they're going to make a lot of money and they're already starting to do it. There's UAP projects, nonfiction projects in various stages of development throughout LA County. I want to help them get together. So, one, the people in this field will get to make some money, which they have well earned and will need to continue their work. And that the people in the film industry will get the right information so they don't do stupid stuff, which they have been doing lately. I'm glad they're doing these productions, but they're screwing up because they're not getting consultants from the people that know the stuff, the ones that have written these books, okay?
Right.
So that's what the HDA is. If you have a track record in UAP research, activism, journalism, whatever, documentaries, and think you'd like to be a Hollywood Disclosure founding member on the UAP side, costs nothing. Get in touch with me or Dan. Contact information is on the site. If you have a track record in the content creation, any part of it, acting, directing, producing, post-production, pre-production, any aspect of the content industry, but you've got a track record and you're willing to put your name, your bio and resume, a brief, condensed resume up on the site, costs nothing, acknowledging to the world that I make content and I like this issue is righteous for me. Submit your interest to us and we will see if we can add you to it. We have a board of 20. We have about 75, 80. Now we have about 70 founding members now. We expect to be at 200 within a month or so. And we'll continue to grow as needed. And the whole purpose is focused though. It's primarily a post-disclosure enterprise. In other words, this is being done not so much to get a lot of stuff together and happening to bring about disclosure. We're practically to disclosure. It is anticipating the demands, enormous worldwide content demands that will be on the content creating business about this subject. Once all the heads of state have confirmed, we're not alone.
Wow.
Everybody's want to know everything immediately and in various ways.
Of course you can imagine. I'm asking.
Yeah.
One person I'm asking is the person who is literally imagining this stuff right now, but the post-disclosure world.
Yep.
The amount of innovation, creativity, growth, learning,
Reform.
the terror, possibly.
Not much of that.
Uncertainty.
We create the terror.
Okay, well, there will be a lot of uncertainty, but a lot of opportunity.
Sure.
Crisis equals opportunity, right? Yeah, I'm envisioning asking Steve Bassett to come back on the program post-disclosure, and we can have like an 8-hour interview at that point. However, I'm going to have to cut this one off at about 2. Steve, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm going to follow your stuff very closely, like everyone who's listening should, and I'm hoping that we'll meet and talk again. Have a good weekend.
I appreciate your patience, David, letting me rant a little bit.
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
I'm a huge admirer of the podcaster revolution, and just keep, building a platform, whatever. And if you can monetize the damn thing down the line and live well, I'm totally behind it.
That's just icing on the cake. Getting to talk to people who've been in the middle of all this stuff, that's a reward enough right there for me. But again, thank you, Steve. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Good night.
Good night.